Good evening, Daniel Wright families, and welcome to tonight's curriculum night. I am Nina Nusbaum, the assistant principal, and tonight I will present to you information about standard-based grading. I hope that you find this presentation valuable, informative, and resourceful. Thank you so much for watching this video, and let's get started. I will share my screen and we will start the presentation in a minute. And here we go. So at Daniel Wright Junior High School, we strongly believe that the purpose of learning is growth. So tonight, this presentation will address the standard-based grading practices. Tonight's presentation will also answer some of the following questions. What is standard-based grading and how it is helpful? How does SBG prepare your child for Stevenson High School? How do you know your child is making adequate growth in each standard, and how can you support your child at home? So what is SBG? Well, the goal of the standard-based grading model is to better communicate what each student knows and is able to do according to content standards or the learning targets. Also, it removes extra factors and solely focuses on proficiency. So those work habits, such as homework completion, participation, preparedness, those are reported separately and they're not part of the content standard proficiency levels reporting. In addition to that, the SBG model offers emotional safety. We all know that a lot of our students do experience fear of testing and are anxious during assessments. So one of the benefit of SBG is that this approach offers our students this emotional safety so that they can be successful during assessments. The model also measures students' knowledge of the grade level content over time, and this is very important. It is not one and done. Good news is that students have plenty of opportunities to demonstrate the growth and learning and continue to do so. So I have attached here a little chart, and I hope this this little visual will really help you grasp the core idea and goal of the SBG model. So what is standards-based grading? Well, we start with learning a new skill. Then we practice the skill, and while we practice, it's normal to make mistakes. This is totally fine. We encourage kids to make mistakes. We welcome them. And we also want students to see the mistakes as opportunities for new learning and new discovery. Once a child makes mistakes, well, now it's time to analyze what went wrong and how to fix those mistakes, and then quiz that skill, evaluate the skill and the knowledge. Throughout that evaluation, during that assessment, they might see that they're making more mistakes. Well, now it's time to ask for additional help, additional resources, practices, so that they can analyze again their work, guide their learning, and fix those mistakes. Time to practice again and reevaluate the skill. Each student can repeat this cycle as needed until they demonstrate this mastery, the mastery of the content, the skill, or the learning target. So the SBG academic levels of progression, these are categories, and they are used throughout the year on classroom work, assignments, assessments, tasks, activities, and report cards to describe a student's academic achievement. We also have descriptors, and those are used for academic and social emotional learning standards and learner behavior characteristics, as we call them LBCs. Those behavior characteristics are, for example, homework completion or coming prepared to school, having the necessary materials to be successful in class, etc. And here are the categories: meets, nearly meets, approaching, and beginning. The descriptors are the narratives that explain what does it mean to meet the standard, what does it mean to nearly meet, and the same applies for approaching and beginning. So here, let's look at an example of a report card. So this is a report card for social studies class. And at the top, you can see the standard-based grading descriptors and the categories meets, nearly meets, approaching, beginning, and not assessed. So if you notice an NA on your child's report card, well, that means that the child has not been assessed, or this skill has not been assessed yet, or the students have not started exploring this content yet. Also, the descriptors explain what does it mean that your student is meeting, or what does the student need to do, be able to demonstrate and show in order to meet or nearly meet. Why is the student approaching, and what does it mean if a BG proficiency level is assigned? So in this particular example, what I circled in red are the content standard, the academic standard for social studies class. The social studies class is one of our core subjects. The core subject or the core classes at Daniel Wright are social studies, science, language arts, math, and Spanish. And we report on those based on trimesters. And the CAPE classes, as we call them, those are creative arts, health, and physical education, we report quarterly. So let's look at this example that covers social studies. You can see that this particular child has met all of the standards that have been assessed throughout the first, second, and third trimester and the content areas. And in blue, what I circle in blue are those learning behaviors, or those learners characteristics. We have divided them into two categories. The first one includes participation and productivity. And in order for a student to meet that category, the student needs to participate meaningfully in class or group activities and use time to produce quality work. And the second category includes the preparedness and homework. And in order for a child to meet that learner characteristics, he or she needs to arrive prepared for class, is able to access and use the materials efficiently, and complete homework daily. I hope this example of the social studies report card was helpful. So now let's look at this question. How does SBG affect the transfer of grades to Stevenson? Well, students do not receive credit or student hours for middle level courses. In order for a student to get those credits for graduation from District 125, the student needs to be earning those credits at Stevenson. So those classes need to be completed at Stevenson. And the actual cumulative files or student cum folders, as we call them, are sent to Stevenson High School. However, the course grades do not transfer. Now, how does the standard-based grading model affect placement in classes at Stevenson? Well, placement is a process that includes a lot of conversation between the Daniel Wright and Stevenson teachers and administrators. All of our teachers at Daniel Wright participate in articulation meetings with Stevenson High School teachers. And during those meetings, they collaborate and discuss placement, courses, they design curriculum, assessment. So a lot of collaborative conversations are taking place during these articulation meetings, and our teachers do participate in those very often. Data such as common unit assessments, common end-of-year assessments, and the national map assessments, or NWA, will also be used to make a placement recommendation. That conversation about placement recommendation is happening between the student and the Daniel Wright teacher, as well as the Daniel Wright teacher and the students' families. So the teacher will provide a description, an explanation, and evidence why he or she is making that recommendation. However, regardless of our teachers' recommendations, students and the families can make their own choice of course level when they move on to Stevenson High School. How does SBG align with grading practices at Stevenson? Well, Here is a great quote from Mr. Rabel, who is the Director of Assessment, Research, and Evaluation at Stevenson High School. And he explained that at Stevenson, they use a competency-based grading system that is called evidence-based reporting. What that means is that throughout each semester, the teachers at Stevenson collect, monitor, and review students' produced evidence and essential course skills. What that means is those teachers collect and monitor student work and collect that evidence so that they can assign a proficiency level for an essential course skill. So ultimately, each teacher assigns a final grade that is based on that collected evidence and based on the student's level of competence. Similarly, compliance behaviors such as homework completion, participation, preparedness are not directly factored into the grade the same way we're doing it at Daniel Wright. Those are not part of the academic proficiency level. So standard-based grading, Mr. Abel says that prepares students for these types of grading and learning environment through continual performance and reflection with a set of core standards. And he says it really well, that when this SBG model or approach is well and properly implemented, it can promote self-reliant, confident learners who are capable of navigating the rigors and complexity of higher education. And that is the ultimate goal of all Daniel Wright teachers. So how does SBG prepare students for the ACT and SATs? Well, here's a science example. So bear with me as I go through it. So ACT science section assesses the following. Here's a topic in science and engineering practices, and here are some examples of those. Evaluation of models, inferences and experimental results, scientific investigation and interpretation of data. So let's take a look and see how is the ACT doing the interpretation of the data and how Daniel Wright assessed the science standards. So you can see on one side is the ACT and on the other side is Daniel Wright. I'm not going to go over these in depth, but they are very well aligned, which helps students be very successful when they're taking the ACT and SATs. Here is a great question that many parents and students are asking. Is SBG more subjective than past grading practices? Past grading practices being assigning percentages, scores, letter grades, points, any type of numerical values. Well, in the past, teachers were able to subjectively assign those points to tasks, classwork, assessments, assignments, homework, any type of activities. And the final grade was an objective quantitative calculation. It was an average. So the final grade was an average of all of the grades throughout a quarter or trimester on that particular content, skill, or standard. However, the data average was subjectively chosen. While the use of rubrics and standard-based grading model does decrease the subjectivity by clearly articulating what students should know and be able to do. So here's a great example of an 8th grade language arts rubric for argumentative writing. Now, the team of teachers have decided that this particular assignment, on this particular assignment, students will have 3 proficiency levels: meets, approaching, or beginning. They're also offering students questions in the reading and research part, development part, and organization part that students can ask themselves while they're working on their argumentative writing. So these questions can guide students' learning and help them self-evaluate, self-direct, and make those tweaks to improve the quality of their work and ultimately meet the standard. Under the meets, approaching, and beginning, in each box, there's a narrative, a great explanation of what it looks like for a student to meet a standard. Students can go back to that rubric and reevaluate their learning throughout the process of writing that rubric is very helpful tool to assist students and also not just give them a guidance, but also provide them that prompt. Hey, it's time to ask for help. It's time for additional resources to navigate your learning so you can meet the standard. No GPA, no National Honor Society. Well, how will this impact college admissions and applications? Well, the great news here is this quote from Dan Miller and Sarah English for Stevenson High School post-secondary counselors, and they explain it really well. And they say that colleges are now increasingly utilizing a holistic evaluation of a high school senior's accomplishments only throughout the high school years. And colleges do not really have a preference for specific clubs, sports, or community service organization, but they're actually really looking to see how students are engaging in ways that promote their growth, their self-reflection, and leadership with any few areas. So while middle school courses, grades, and extracurricular activities can certainly shape the student's character and development, the college admission only specifically asks for high school courses, grades, and meaningful involvement outside of classes. So it is great that the focus is now on those experiences that are meaningful to students inside and outside their classes. Now, let's face it, it is difficult for parents to support students at home. Learning expectations have changed, and a lot of things have changed in the past 2 years, and it has become more difficult to help students and keep them organized. Well, these are some examples. Why are the challenges more robust? Well, learning is no longer textbook based. Next generation science standards are based on application of science and engineering practices. The instruction isn't content focused. It is more focused on the application of skills within each discipline. I'm sure you're catching the pattern here. Common Core in math centers on application of mathematical practices, and here are examples of such: making sense of problems. So students really need to make sense of the problem in front of them in order for them to reason and come up with a solution and justify that finding and be able to construct a viable arguments to defend their solution. So right now, really knowledge and instruction and learning and demonstration of skill is focused on application of that skill, of application of that knowledge, and not just acquiring the theory behind it. How do parents know when to intervene? These are some great questions you can ask yourselves, but better yet, you can ask your children and engage in those conversations with them and ask them, is the grade that you received formative, meaning was it collected during learning, or summative? Was it collected at the end of a learning? Well, what does that mean? During learning is when kids are in the classroom exploring, asking questions, working with others. And while they're doing that, teachers are monitoring, they're collecting that evidence, they're evaluating kids on the go, and they're providing this real-time, specific, meaningful feedback to students where the receiver can implement that feedback right away and improve learning on the spot. And summative is great collected at the end of the learning. If you remember in the beginning of the presentation, I shared this chart with you where we're learning a new skill, we're practicing, we're reassessing, we're fixing those mistakes, we're analyzing what went wrong and how we can improve. And at the end of this cycle, we have a summative assessment. If a child receives a proficiency level that is not satisfying, now another great question is there an opportunity for retake and how we can proceed? Another thing you can ask is how many times has the standard been assessed? Well, maybe they're just starting. Maybe it was assessed multiple times and the student is still struggling. Now it's time to look for different resources and acquire additional help from a teacher per se. Another great question Is there time left in the grading period to demonstrate learning? A great conversation that student can engage with the teacher and ask all of these great questions, or you can ask your students to answer them for you and see what the next action steps are. How can you help your child at home? Well, start with the following question. Is the grade for content standard or LBC? So if it's content, are there any study guides? Is there any study help? Can the student reach out to the teacher or see them during flex time? Or are there any additional resources to support the child to increase their knowledge on that content standard? Or is it learning behavior? Meaning maybe a student is not completing homework all the time and it's trying to catch up, or is forgetting the needed materials to succeed in the classroom. Then let's try and help the student be better organized or be better at managing time. And believe me, this is not an easy task for a parent to help our middle schooler with organization. So now the question is the assignment available for retake? Let's reach out to the teacher and make a plan of what the student needs to do before they proceed with a retake. What learning needs to happen before they do a retake? When can they do it and where? They can schedule this with the teacher. They can definitely sit down and create a great action plan that will help the students succeed. Here are some examples or suggestions for you to consider and work with your child. Collaboratively or together, read the grading rubric to understand what students are expected to know and be able to do. Ask your child to review those rubrics with you and help you understand and explain to you what the expectations are. Also, encourage them to share with you what they think their strengths are, or what are the areas they need to improve upon, or what are they afraid of. They might have some fears or obstacles that we can help them overcome. Review the retake opportunities and options with your child. If they're not clear on those, they can reach out to a particular teacher and ask specific questions. And like I said, create that action plan for retake. And finally, reach out to teachers and ask questions. And I encourage you to encourage your kids to reach out to their teachers and ask questions, to meet them during flex time, to ask for extra help, and take advantage of all of the plenty opportunities and resources that Daniel Wright offers so that we can support all learners and celebrate their successes. So, therefore, we believe that a grade should not be compensation, but communication. So thank you so much for watching this video tonight. And I hope that was informative and helpful and valuable. And please, please do not hesitate to reach out to us with any questions or concerns. So thank you so much for watching and have a great evening. Bye-bye.